Welcome. I'm Jim Eskin, founder of Eskin Fundraising Training. And by the way, you might just see a few people on the screen, but maybe 100 times more people watch the recording that we post on social media and now on a streaming TV channel. So you all are the stars, okay? And today we're talking, it's not bosses from hell, but it's managing up. And hello, Jessica. Who we got there? Okay. Anyways, she'll come in, and there's Marv. Welcome back, Marv. Anyways, anybody who knows me knows that I love trivia. And now, before you Google this one, I believe if it's not worth knowing, I want to know it. And so I was wording a scientific study today on which state, there are 50 of them, right? Who's a smart guy? Marv, there are 50 states?
Yes.
Okay, there are 50 states. Of the 50 states, which one has the best behaved kids and which one has the worst behaved kids? And I want you to type it in the chat space, and that goes to our LinkedIn audience, the other audience members. And I'm going to give you a huge clue. Both those states begin with the letter M. The best behaved kids and the worst behaved kids. Type it in the chat space. John, can you monitor those?
Hmm.
You want to type in the best behaved and the worst behaved, and they both start with the letter M.
All right, we're getting best Massachusetts. That seems like a homer call to me, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Worst behaved kids couldn't be from New Jersey because that's where I was born and raised. Maryland is best. Worst is Mississippi. So we've got some folks that are giving us best Missouri, worst
Yeah.
Michigan.
Okay, answer time. And Dr. Posner, I hope you didn't Google it. But first of all, the worst behaved kids are in the state of Maine. Okay. Which surprised me. Okay. I've been to Maine. It's a pretty nice state. Maine has the worst fog I've ever seen in my life. Oh man, I couldn't see my hand. I had a tough assignment once. And the worst state is okay. That's the worst state. The best state is Maryland. Who'd have got that? And I have a theory.
Maryland.
Maine, yeah, Maine. Is that where you were born, Marjorie?
Yep, Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay.
Number one school education in the United States.
Okay.
Public
school. Well, I have a different theory. Maine being the worst state, they have the best lobsters, or somehow the lobster makes you bad. And Maryland, I think, has the best crab cakes, and somehow that makes you good. So, anyways, that's Jim's opinion on that. Okay.
Huh.
Let's go. Today's topic again is managing up, and we have some new people. And actually, I like that she's in the upper left-hand corner. Rebecca Silverman from the great state of New Jersey, which sometimes is not the best smelling state. But Rebecca, you describe yourself as a neurodivergent fundraiser. And just the other day, I thought, I don't know if she was giving me a compliment or the other way. My wife said, "You are neurodivergent." And so, could you explain neurodivergence?
Absolutely. And I'm going to take that as a compliment from your wife. So
Yeah,
neurodivergent.
I don't get many from her.
Take them where you can. It's an umbrella term to describe anybody whose brain maybe processes things differently. So it could be someone with autism, ADHD, dyslexia, basically anyone who processes cognitive things differently than what we would consider to be neurotypical.
How about I'm OCD? Would I join the club?
Yes, absolutely.
And tell me, if it's okay, what advantages do you think neurodivergent people, I don't know if this is a self-fulfilling prophecy, but I think they tend to be more creative.
I would agree with that, and maybe I'm just, tooting my own horn. I think it helps to see the world in a different way, and maybe that contributes to it.
Okay. And how do you think it works in fundraising?
That's a great question. I think the way I see things in systems really helps me zoom in and out. So my fundraising has been primarily focused on institutional and foundation grants. So being able to zoom in, see, all of the details, the budget, making sure that that aligns with the same story the narrative is telling, but then zooming out and seeing the entire package that you're putting in front of a funder. How are they going to see it and put everything together? So I think it's been an advantage.
Okay, I do too. And I like to say, if you know you're crazy, you're probably not crazy. That's the way I like to describe myself. I'm proud of being crazy. Dr. Charles Posner, retired associate professor at Harvard Medical School. I got a quick question for you. Which is the hottest baseball team in the sport right now?
There's a little league team down the down the street that is 25-0, even better
Yeah.
than the Red Sox.
I mean, Chuck and I, the Red Sox runs in our blood. And I thought, okay, I can move on in my life. I'm moving to football. And oh my God, all of a sudden the Red Sox have turned it around and say, now I got to pay attention to them. I'm addicted to Boston sports, okay, as Marv knows and stuff.
Yeah.
And Marv's addicted to baseball. Before we go any further, I'd like to call on Cindy Sullivan, who's Senior Development Director for one and only Alamo Colleges Foundation and the immediate past president of the Association of Fundraising Professionals chapter of San Antonio. And Cindy, do you mind? We have several members of the AFP chapter haven't registered. I don't see them yet. But could you give a quick chapter update? I guess you're the immediate past president and you're a elder stateswoman, okay?
That doesn't sound complimentary, Joe.
Oh, you're like
Stateswoman.
you're like the Margaret Thatcher here, okay?
That's right. That's right. But thank you for the opportunity to visit with everybody. Yes, I'm the immediate past president for the local chapter here in San Antonio of AFP. So just want to say hello to everybody who might be on the call or maybe tuning in later to enjoy the broadcast. And give a quick shout out to Mr. Eskin, who is our education sponsor for the chapter. We could not do what we do without you, sir. So
Hey, I think AFP made a great decision who the fundraiser of the year was in 26. I felt like he was the oldest person ever to get that award. I felt like Clint Eastwood or something.
It was a red carpet moment.
Yeah. Tim Farrell, who's the 23 years in the military. Thank you for your service, sir. Who has run several nonprofits, now a vice president with the Chamber for Military Affairs and Cybersecurity. Is that right?
And a few other sectors.
And washing windows too, right?
Pretty much whatever they need.
Hey, I'm going to take advantage since you know the military, okay? And we're going to go around the cycle here. First of all, what do you think the difference is in managing up in the military and in the civilian workforce? What's the difference in managing up in those two sectors?
Well, yeah, I would submit that they're probably more similar than one would think. People make assumptions that there's this exact knowledge of you rise to a certain position in the military or you rise to a certain rank that you know exactly X, Y, and Z. You have experience in X, Y, and Z. But as you rise up in the military, you will often go to broader duties than you may be experienced in. Similar to what you find in the private sector, in the civilian world, where people don't necessarily wear it on their sleeve or wear it on their shirt. what their experience is. People assume it in the military. You're a certain rank, you hold a certain position, you're from a certain specialty. They know exactly what the boss knows. But often you still have to have conversations, and you still have to figure that out. So managing up really in both sectors, I would submit, is knowing what the strategy is, knowing what the priorities of the organization are, knowing what your piece of the portfolio is, and a little broader what your boss's piece of the portfolio is, and making sure that everything you're doing contributes to that leader's priorities, which hopefully contribute to the organizational strategy. So I really do think there's more similarity across sectors, and certainly across a sector that's not, shall we say, known to everybody with the military intimately, than one might think.
I'm going to tell you, you surprised me, but I'm just a civilian. I haven't worn
You're
the
not just in
mindful
anything,
habits.
Jim, first of all.
Thank you. Thank you. Hey, that was nice. I'm a just neurodivergent somebody. Dr. Posner, who's spent entire career in medicine. I shouldn't make assumptions, but I will. I think there's some pretty big egos among physicians. So tell me, in the medical field, how we manage up.
It's I think difficult in any field. I think it's politically kind of risky. I think that it is can be difficult depending on who you're trying to manage up. And I really think you need to think about, your position within, and it's similar to what Tim said, your position within the hierarchy, so that you make sure that it's appropriate for you to manage up. Maybe, I have strong opinions about things, but maybe they're not the right opinions. And so you got to be careful. But once you've decided that you can influence, or your influence on a particular person above you is warranted, then again, you've got to be politically, sensitive. You've got to make sure that they understand that that you're not trying to threaten their authority. But you also want to try to make them feel like, when you do things, you point out the fact that this is something that, you learn from, your experiences, and maybe that will be sort of osmose to that person. It's very complex, but I agree. Egos are incredibly difficult to navigate, and you better understand the ego before you start managing up. You got to
Okay,
mitigate that to some extent.
we're gonna jump around. I have seen an old friend. She's not old, but I haven't seen her in a while. Welcome to the learning community, Susan Yerkes, who knows more about Hollywood than anyone I know. So I have a bonus question. I have to admit, in addition to being neurodivergent, I'm addicted to streaming TV. In fact, after this broadcast, I'm gonna have dinner and go back to my favorite show. This is a bonus. You don't have to answer this, but do you have a favorite streaming TV show?
You know what, Jim? Recently, it's been Star City and
Yeah.
For All
Hmm.
Mankind on Apple. I thought For All Mankind was just kind of dumb at first, but I really got into it.
Okay, and talk about their egos in the medical field. I think, Susan, their egos in Hollywood. Would you agree? How would you
Yes.
say? How would you say managing up compares in Hollywood compared to the rest of the country?
Hey, it depends on the board, it depends on the organization. There's some spectacular egos right here in town, but there's some prima donnas, and I'm recently the chair of a nonprofit, and I
Oh, when I ask you which one, Susan, which one?
it's called Bay Area Harm Reduction Coalition.
Huh? What's its mission?
Well, basically public health. We have Bexar County is the only county in Texas with a legal syringe exchange. And that is basically to prevent HIV and hepatitis, other bloodborne diseases spreading, especially through the homeless. So,
Yeah.
and unstably housed people. So we actually distribute clean injection supplies, to kind of keep them alive and build bridges until we can get people into treatment, into recovery.
Well, thank you for your service. And it's just great to have you in our learning community. And
Jim,
she does.
you're an icon. I think it's
I'm
really
what?
great.
Wait a
You're an
minute.
icon.
I think he's a bunch of
Hey,
things, icon
hey,
being only one of them.
I think this show is over. Susan, I'm a fundraiser. It is my job to say what people want to hear. Um, okay, I don't know what to say, but I will move on to somebody who does know what to say. Marjorie Hope, author of the best-selling Connect Diplomacy and the founder of American Connected, who's very familiar with the countries around the world and what 8 billion people have in common, which she'll tell you is a whole lot. Marjorie, how do you compare management styles in the United States to other countries you visited?
Can't. We're all people, so that part we all have in common. And I think a lot of people are so remote right now that you can work wherever you want. But as far as management, you kind of can't compare apples to apples because, for example, in Finland, if you have a job and you have a baby, you have 420 days off. So of leave. So you're not managing that person, but yet they still have a job. Whereas in America, they would be fired.
Hey, for point clarification, are you supposed to be working remotely during those 420 days? What are your
No, you don't have to work. You're
responsibilities?
paid. They pay you. They
So
just
it's
pay
like
you.
a vacation. It's like a vacation.
Paid leave. That's right. Healthcare. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Who's
So
got the
I
best?
think as far as people are people, I mean, if you've got a job, you're probably going to have the same type of management. A manager is going to make sure the job gets done. So in that part, we're all the same because the job has to get completed successfully. And that's the most important part, obviously.
Okay, let's continue. If I can remember my place, I think it's time for the soon to be Dr. Luna. Congratulations, by the way, on your new series. What is it? Leadership Under Pressure.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's my newsletter.
Okay, talk a little about that. Talk a little about leadership under pressure and maybe how that relates to managing up.
Sure. So it does in a big way. I guess I'm trying to manage up in a very broad way by writing it, but it comes from my research and my passion for trauma-informed leadership. And so I'm trying to reframe that very phrase and talk about leadership under pressure, because I think that there's a lot of pressure right now in the field in the nonprofit sector, but also for leadership to really step up and manage people through a lot of critical changes, losses of funding, massive change. And so what I'm bringing into that newsletter is many ideas about how to maintain or gather a sense of self-awareness and awareness of what other people are dealing with, and just bringing that into the work one step at a time.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And Francesca, and by the way, let's see, what is your position at the Alamo Colleges Foundation?
I am a development manager.
Good luck to you. And what's your position on the AFP board?
I am the communications chair.
Okay, you got the word out. We got a lot of last minute signups. What's your perspective on managing up?
Some people make it easier than others.
Yeah.
But it is all about communication. letting people know what you need, when you need it, um, and just being comfortable enough to voice your opinion, in a professional way.
I like it. Okay, we'll come back to you. And thanks for also getting the word out. I know we have several other members that are, I guess, not on the screen, but we got a lot of last minute signups because of your communications. Martha Roy, you're familiar with the world of politics. You're familiar with the world of higher education. You're familiar with the world of nonprofits, and also you're a huge entrepreneur with something, I don't know, one time you had 40 coaches. What's your perspective on managing up?
Environment in the world of consulting. Having been in enough shops, where we've had managers and I've been the top person, I don't think it's the responsibility of people in subordinate positions to manage up. I think you do that at your own peril. I think a couple folks have already
Yeah.
mentioned that. Unless you have a very trusting environment and you have an environment where there's a mindset where we're all in this together and we're all helping to make sure we're, clicking at all high gears.
Have you discovered such
You don't
an
suggest to us.
environment yet?
My experience is when somebody
Yeah.
voices that it's a safe environment, it's
Yeah.
probably not a safe environment.
Yeah.
And that needs to be voiced non-verbally. That you've got to read the room that it's a safe environment. Otherwise, you're at your own peril.
Yeah, if you
Chuck,
get to the point where you feel compelled to tell your boss, your superior, that they need to learn something, you better start putting your resume in the in the mail.
Chuck,
don't
let's go
tell,
back
you
for you for a
suggest.
moment. Chuck, you're of all of us, I think you've been in the most life and death situations, okay? And I mean, you're opening up Jim Eskin's heart, which happened, okay? It went smoothly. But how do you have differing opinions when you're opening up a patient's heart? And I think you should do this and not that or whatever. How do you have I don't know what the decision making is like when the stakes are so high.
It's one of the things that I studied, and one of the things that I did a lot of work in at my institution. We have a terrible time communicating, and
Yeah.
when we don't communicate well, there are multiple people that suffer from that. The primary person that suffers from that is the patient.
That's great to hear.
They don't get the best care when there's a lack of communication or egos get in the way of things. But it also is the team. It's about teamwork. It's about and if the leader doesn't communicate well and doesn't check their ego at the door, then it's very hard to make sure that there's good communication. And I've done a lot of work in this regard, and I have a motto that the answer is almost always in the room. It just doesn't always get to the patient. And that has a lot to do with ego. And that has a lot to do with culture. And one of the things that we've been trying to do is trying to break that, and that that it's open. The patient doesn't care whether I have the right answer as the attending physician or the nurse has the right answer, because for that minute she knew something that I forgot, or had just been introduced to that concept, that I hadn't heard about in 20 years. And if I don't feel comfortable enough to accept her, her brilliance, then the patient doesn't get the care that they deserve. And so it really is important to, to communicate in a way where everyone has a voice. There needs to be a leader. There needs to be somebody who, directs things, but that leader needs to be comfortable enough within their skin to accept the fact that they might not have the answer at that time. And it's okay to be wrong. It's not okay to be wrong, have the answer there, and not accept the possibility that you've got a better answer. And so that's something that is incredibly important and missing throughout medicine. It's beginning to sort of percolate and beginning to, get into the culture, but it's still not quite there yet. And I do think patients suffer because of it.
Talking about egos, you were part of the Harvard faculty,
Oh, there's
and
no egos at Harvard.
oh, there's no egos at Harvard,
No,
huh?
no.
Really?
They'll
What
be the
happened?
first to tell you.
What happened to them?
No, there's tons of egos, believe me.
Well, how's that work out? How do you how does
As I
which is
said,
worse?
with difficulty.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not just that I won't accept things, it's that a subordinate won't speak up for
yeah,
fear that they'll be either
yeah,
embarrassed, they'll be,
yeah.
they spoke up before and somebody got down on them. We've got to change that. We've got to allow people to be part of the team. When I talk about this, I say, if I had a group of people that knew a particular subject, and all of them, they knew it at a different level. And if I gave them each an individual test, there'd be a spectrum of scores. Some people would do well on the test and other people's wouldn't do so well on the test. There'd be a spectrum in between. But if I gave this group of people one test to do together, I can almost guarantee they'd get close to 100%.
Mm.
And our job is to get the 100% to the patient. And
Mhm.
that is all about ego. And again, you're right. Harvard's got tremendous, these are people who are at the top of their game and who have been told their entire life that they're brilliant, they're the best and the brightest, the cream of the
Yeah,
crop. And it goes to some people's heads.
yeah. Hey, before we go around the loop, John, does Jessica or want to put her audio or video on? And same with Adriana. Jessica, before we go around the loop, do you want to, or you want to plead the fifth? You got a choice. Jessica, are you there? Adriana, are you there? Okay, they're going to plead the fifth. I get it. I guess they don't feel safe, Dr. Posner, in this environment. I'm sorry.
Well, I didn't say it was a safe environment, so they can't
Yeah.
feel safe.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Rebecca, as a fellow neurodivergent, your boss, whoever your boss is, it might be you're consulting, it might be a client, you might be a CEO, it might be a board chair, whoever. When whoever who's supervising you is doing something that you know is just plain out wrong, how do you get them to think differently?
I think you have to approach it in two ways. I think you have to have confidence and also humility. So, what I like to do is get curious and find out where they're coming from and why they are putting forth the idea that they are, and see if we can't get aligned that way. Because I don't think it's effective to say, well, I know best because of X, Y, and Z. I think you want to arrive at the solution together and get that person's buy-in.
One of the
Oh,
things that I, one of the
yeah, go
things
ahead,
that I,
Chuck.
one of the things that I've done, I ran an educational lab that did education and research. And one of the things, as I said, we were teaching people sort of how to communicate as teams. And one of the tricks, and I totally agree with you, Rebecca. One of the tricks that we, not tricks, but one of the processes that we learned that worked well is not to assume you know why things happened, because we always make assumptions about that. And we used to approach, mistakes, or even not just mistakes, but even things that were done well that you wanted to emphasize by asking or approaching it in three different ways. You say, I noticed that this happened. And so you point out the fact that something happened that you thought was interesting and maybe we can get something out of it. And then you say, and I worry about this, or I'm concerned about this, not worry, but I'm concerned about this because in my understanding, this is why I think it's not necessarily the right way of doing things. But then instead of saying, this is how you do it right, you say, what do you think? Tell me where you're
Yeah.
coming from. And don't assume you know why they did it incorrectly, or they behaved or acted the way they acted. Figure out what frame they were in when they made the decision and try to change the frame. Try to sort of help them see where things could have been done differently. And if you do it well, it's not non-threatening, and you do point out that there's a potential issue, but you don't do it in a way that demoralizes people, and you do it in a way that makes people reflect. And then you have a better chance of changing behavior.
Okay, let's go to Vice President Farrell. Tim, your supervisor, past, present, or future, is telling you to do something that's flat out disastrous, okay? What are ways you can respond?
Well, I appreciate you asking that, because one of the things I wanted to revisit earlier is I think we're speaking a little bit right now in with respect in too much fear. It's been my experience both in the military and in the private sector that more often than not, there is going to be openness to folks bringing up things if they're done in a respectful manner, and if they're done with some meat and potatoes to them. There's going to be a capacity for people to listen to a large or small degree that the emperor may be lacking in clothing in a certain way. I realize that will be a risk calculation that a lot of people need to make on their own, and it'll vary from organization to organization. It'll vary from ego to ego. But if I'm faced with a scenario that you're describing there, for instance, I'm going to first off make sure I've got my ducks in a row. I'm going to go with data. I'm going to go where data may not completely back it up. I'm going to go with reasoned and logical analysis. And I'm going to state my case. And if it's not illegal, immoral, or unethical, and it's just plain dumb, I'm gonna potentially need to take some risk for the good of the organization. And I've done that in multiple fora. More often than not, been able to be heard and been able to affect some level of change. I've also been that guy with no clothes. Didn't know I had no clothes. Didn't know at the time I was, darn near buck naked. But I checked my ego at the door, and I'm like, okay. I need to rethink that. I want to believe in better angels in most cases. Now, not be Pollyanna and naive, but come with reasoned analysis, come with as much data as you can, come with passion that doesn't cross over the line into emotion, and state your case. And I believe in my soul, more often than not, you're going to be heard, because that's been my experience in multiple sectors. And in one, we often stereotype that just wants to have orders obeyed, which is not always the case. We know when there's a life and death situation. We know when we're literally or metaphorically under fire, and it's time to make a decision and move out. But most situations, unless you're on the operating table, unless you're in a firefight, are not that. And there is time to be able to say, we need to shut the door and talk this out. Now, have I done that at my peril in some cases? Yes, I have. Have I done that to the point where I had to feel like I needed to submit a resignation? Yes, I have. That's a value judgment, and that's a risk calculation that folks need to make. But again, I'm grateful that it's been my experience that it typically doesn't get to that in a positive way.
Yeah. Okay, let's we lost Margie. Francesca, and by the way, you don't report to Dr. Sullivan, do you? Who's your supervisor?
I do report to Cindy, yes.
Let her
Okay,
have it.
can we?
Let her have it.
Well, let's
Both
talk
barrels.
about
Yeah,
that.
okay. Can we create, Cindy, do you give permission for a safe environment here? You get, okay? This is Vegas. What says here stays here. Hey, Margie, what do you do? Because you've worked with politicians and celebrities and people of that ilk. What do you do when you have a supervisor, a client, whoever, who's paying you, who's in charge, and they tell you to do something you know that's flat out wrong? How do you respond?
I tell them it's wrong and I don't do it. And then I find the way that I think would work better. And I say, let's do it this way.
How do they respond?
Um, I'm trying to think. Usually, okay. Like, okay, if you think that's better. But I mean, I'm not
Okay.
going to do it the wrong way.
Yeah,
I have too many principles. So it's like, I'm like, principle that way? It's just not going to happen.
yeah.
But once
Yeah.
that happens, I think you're obligated to sort of step back once the,
Fact.
you know,
That's
once, you know, once
I
the,
won't do something wrong. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, once whatever the decision was is made and things settle down, I think you really do need to, you know, talk about it to make sure that not only do they think you're not a jerk, but they're learning something from it.
Well, I actually had that happen once. I had a candidate that I always tell them in the beginning, tell me everything and anything that you might have done wrong so we know how to circumvent it.
Yeah.
And in this particular case, he said nothing and, oh, whatever, you know, nothing big. And then it turns out I get a call one night on a Friday night from the opposing race, and they said, listen, by the way, we're going to go public with this. Your candidate just had a DUI. And I'm like, what? And I called him and he's like, yeah, I kind of forgot to mention that. Forgot, you just lost because you should have told me in the beginning. We could have circumvented it. But again, I won't do something wrong. And I said, that's wrong. And I don't know what we can do about it, but we'll. You forgot? I mean,
Well,
in that
it's
case,
Mark.
you did lose.
Mark would tell you in today's political environment of all the sins you commit, I think a DUI is kind of docile. But if we
Yeah.
saved Francesca, and you know, where's your work before the Alamo Colleges, by the way, Francesca?
My first nonprofit job was at the Children's Bereavement Center. I worked there for
Great place.
My
yes.
goodness.
Okay,
Um,
okay,
and then
okay.
I worked at Project Mend before I came to the Alamo
Yeah,
Colleges.
okay. And they're not Dr. Cindy Sullivan. What would you do if a supervisor directed you to do something that was flat out wrong?
Unfortunately, I have been in that position before,
We've all
and
been there. We've all been there.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I did tell them that I did not feel comfortable with doing that, and they they respected my decision, but they just got somebody else to do it in the end.
You know, and I want to say there are differences. I think you can differ on strategy, okay? And that's probably going to cost your organization money. You can differ on principle, and that's going to cost it trust, or you can differ in Dr. Posner's arena, and that's going to cost you a life, you know. So there are different type of consequences. Let's move to Cindy Sullivan because we have walked in similar moccasins. She has lots of egos. She works in the Alamo Colleges Foundation, and she has CEOs, she has a board, she has 5 college presidents, and other things. What do you do when you're asked to do something you know that's flat out wrong?
You know, I had a situation like that also, fortunately not at the Alamo Colleges, where a hiring decision was made that I felt was outside the policies of the organization. So basically, the decision was made to hire somebody who.
Okay, we're having trouble, Cindy. We're having trouble hearing you for a moment.
Okay, let me start over. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Okay. So the decision at that organization was made to hire somebody who would report to me, who was the sister-in-law of my manager. So to me, that, you know, that was not good for morale of the team. It was outside the policies of the organization, and in trying to sway that decision, they were not willing to reconsider that, even though there was, you know, to me, it was very clearly going to be a problem. And I had to leave the job over that because I had to hold my ground. If this is inappropriate, I'm not going to be in this situation. And if we can't find a resolution, this is important enough to me that I'm going to walk away.
It takes a lot of courage, Cindy. I think most of us, to tell you the truth, I think most people don't have that type of courage. You're special. Let's go to another special person. Susan Yerkes, among all our panelists, you've had most experience in the world of journalism, in which there are decisions, I don't know if you call them life or death, but decisions are made on what gets covered, what doesn't get covered, how it's covered. How did you handle, you get a directive to do something that you know is flat out wrong?
Oh, you're muted.
You're on mute.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. I was just thinking about that issue and the fact that I had one particular boss whose idea of what I should be covering in terms of actually, you know, I just thought it was so unprincipled, I couldn't believe it. And
Yeah.
there were a lot of people that shared that impression of that boss.
Yes.
It there was one circumstance in which he ordered me to do something that was a higher up boss that my immediate superiors knew was absolutely wrong, but they weren't willing to go to bat about it. They were scared of him. And so I had to go over his head to explain to his boss why it was a really terrible idea, because actually it hurt. It was very damaging to a major stockholder in in Hearst newspapers. So
That's a big company.
It was an incredibly dumb thing to order me to do. And I lost, you know, that guy started trying to fire me immediately. um, because he was so angry that he'd been busted like that. But but there were several other situations where, you know, I was ordered to disclose something, write about something that I thought was totally wrong to disclose, you know, who someone was having an affair with. You know, if it's not news worthy, then, you know, then I don't want to write it. Somebody else might. But yeah, so those are tough. And at that time, I was in a position to be able to take on that particular manager. They finally made me so uncomfortable that I left the job and just cited hostile work environment.
Yeah.
But you know, it was. So I think Margie is totally right. You absolutely have to hold your ground. And Cindy, you know, you got to do what you believe is right. It would be great if you could just speak reason to the person. I think that should always be something that you try.
Yeah.
But but in this case, that just wasn't a doable deal.
Yeah. Well, you folks pay the ultimate price. Let's go to Randa Luna. I want to say too, as I get older and gain a little neurodivergent wisdom, I am constantly amazed how such smart people can sometimes be so dumb. It's just, I mean, particularly in Washington, by the way, not you, Randa. Okay, Randa, but what did you do when you had somebody in a position to tell you what to do, was going to tell you to do something that was flat out wrong?
Hmm. Couple of times. So the first time it happened was earlier in my career, and I didn't really know what to do. I tried talking to my peers and kind of saying, not so we could gang up, but so we could make a concerted case. Like, I'm not crazy, right? That's not legal. That's not okay. And presenting another option because I had been told, don't come to me with your problems, come to me with solutions. So I was trying to come up with a solution to present that, and it didn't go over, and ultimately I got dinged on our team. Not in an official way, but I was no longer a trustworthy team member for that person for a while. The second time this happened, though, I had the same thing happen, very similar thing, having to do with donor data and who you release that to.
Mhm.
And the way I handled it that time was much different. I actually there was an HR department. So I later quit, not long after this, but I sent the HR department the AFP Code of Ethics, as well as our own organizational
Yeah.
handbook, and submitted it kind of not as a formal grievance, just a heads up. I'm not sure how to handle this. As HR, what would you advise me to do? Which resulted in them having a conversation with my supervisor, which was unfortunately traced right back to me. So it was not long before I went ahead and submitted my resignation with a handful of other grievances that I just went ahead and submitted. So that was unfortunate, but I mean, gosh, sometimes you do. You have to stand your ground no matter what it costs you.
I think
You know,
this
yeah, go ahead, Chuck.
conversation, I'm sorry, this conversation sort of begs the need for mentors. Everyone should
What do
have a
you mean?
mentor. Well, you're not one
Okay,
mentor. You should have multiple mentors, people from within the organization and people from outside the
sure.
organization. So you
If
don't
you,
necessarily start with human resources. You start with
yeah,
somebody that's had experience, that
okay.
you have a personal relationship with, and ultimately, you go to these people for advice. They help you with your career. And I think that's really important. I don't think it's emphasized as much as it should be.
I agree, but I ask you, you're Randa, okay? Maybe she has a mentor like Jim Eskin, maybe she doesn't. And she has a boss telling her to do something that's flat out wrong. Okay, the mentor is completely outside the organizational chart. So what role can the mentor play?
It's an advisory role.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
And the
mean,
only thing,
we're,
oh, go ahead.
we know what's right and wrong from when we were little kids. We don't need to follow politicians. Follow yourself. If you're right, that's great. If you're wrong, then you're wrong.
But
So
they can
Yeah,
help
but
that's
you
Yeah,
navigate
yeah.
navigate the political part of this.
right.
what a sad
That's where the
world.
mentor, you're going to make your
Yeah.
decision, based on your ethics and your principles, and
Correct.
again, what you learned in kindergarten. But
Right.
how do you approach the process
Yeah.
is where mentorship is really important.
You
Right.
know, what a sad culture if you have to give up your job for telling the emperor that he or she wears no clothes. Anyways, let's
Happens
keep
all the
moving
time.
around. Oh, Marv, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said in this regard. Yeah, I really think that in those cases where there's wrong and there's wrong-headed and
Yeah.
there's probably a third level of wrong. You have to decide how high the mountain is that you're willing to scale and decide what's worth, leaping off it. Look at if you get to a point where you're being asked to do something that doesn't sit well with you, regardless of which of those buckets it falls in, you have to make a good decision for yourself. You got to live with yourself and be able to look yourself in the mirror the next day. You also need to remember that that person who's asking you to do something bad is never going to be there when it goes sideways and defend you. You're going to be the scapegoat
Hey,
as well. Not only are you going to be asked to do something wrong that you didn't agree with, you're then going to be the scapegoat later on. And I think Dr. Posner is right. In that scenario, you know what your mentor is going to be for you? A reference.
Yeah.
On your
Well,
future job.
the other thing I
Go
would
ahead,
add
Tim.
with speaking to a mentor, and having been one, and needing one on more than one occasion. One of the things you got to make sure you do, and you as the individual who may be in a quandary is responsible for this. You have to be completely candid and introspective with that mentor as well. And I would ask that mentor to ask these kind of questions of, please make sure you're telling me the whole story. Because if you're not giving that mentor the whole story, including where you've introspectively think, well, let me make sure that I've done everything that I need to do here. Because then you're potentially going to get advice that is ill-informed advice because you didn't share everything that's going on. I've asked folks who've come to me some tough questions when they've come to me with a situation, and I, in some cases, kind of saved them from some serious egg on their face because they weren't looking at everything in the crux of the situation first. Now, if you have done all that, yeah, like Marv is saying, you're going to have to make a value judgment at some point, because especially if it's not illegal or moral or unethical, where a grievance, shall we say, is going to have something that you can land on with some protection, shall we say, yeah, you're going to have to make that hard value judgment at that point. Is this something that I can fall on my sword on, or can I afford to
Yeah.
stay? Can I afford to leave? Those are tough calls, but
Very tough.
they're often necessary calls. As Marv also said, folks who make those tough calls at their own peril, if you've cultivated a reputation for yourself already and nurtured a reputation for yourself already and paid it forward, paid it backward enough where you have to make a tough decision that'll be in your own peril, there will be some good people that will recognize that and will be there to help you on the back end. Quite frankly, Jim Eskin and Marv Leroy have been two of those people, for me, on occasion, where I had to make a tough call, and they were there when I needed them. But they also appreciated that I gave them the whole story when I came to them for that advice, and I came to them with that aftermath.
Right.
Chuck, I want to ask you about a mentor. Say your mentor is very, very prestigious and maybe is in a higher position or stature than your supervisor. When would it be safe to have your mentor intercede in your dilemma?
I generally think it's not, they shouldn't intercede. They should
Okay.
give you advice. They should help you navigate the problem. You don't use your mentor to get involved in your problem. The fact that you have somebody in a higher position is such an advantage, because they either have experience or they know the politics of the situation. But I think, what you're looking for mentorship is advice. They're advisors. They aren't people that are going to fight your fights for you. They're going to tell you when it's appropriate, when it might be appropriate to fight a fight, when it's appropriate to sort of step back. And again, you don't have one mentor; you have multiple mentors.
Right.
With
you get as many
different- with
mentors as you
different
can.
with different qualities, with different experiences, so that you can get a broad perspective instead of from a single person. And I think that's really important. And one of the things I say to young residents is, find someone who can help you in your career. Find multiple people that can be advisors to you, so that you don't have to go at these things alone, and you don't have to go to human resources, because that's the last place you want to start.
Yeah.
First of all, they'll probably give you a
ChatGPT.
shitty advice, And number two, it has its own political ramifications.
Margie, you were going to say something.
Oh, I was going to say you could even ask, and I've done this before. You ask ChatGPT and then ask Claude and get the best answer. And again, these are just opinions, right? I mean, they're not the answer; they're opinions.
And you have to make your decision based on multiple.
Exactly.
I always said you never want to be the smartest person in the room.
That's true always.
You never want to be the smartest person in the room. You want to always get people to challenge you and to have different perspectives. At the end of the day, if you're in charge, you're going to make the decision, but you're going to make a much better decision when you have multiple perspectives giving you.
Yeah, Marv.
You know, this conversation, which has been terrific, has been focused on having a individual in that superior position that somebody we report to. If you're a CEO of a nonprofit,
board,
you report to a board, we got a whole other conversation we need to have.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, and let's this has been such a rich conversation. I want to wrap up with my neurodivergent sister, Rebecca. How do you keep your wits if you have a boss from hell who constantly is testing you? Okay, how do you keep your wits?
I think you have to separate the personal from the professional and remember that their actions are not necessarily a reflection of who you are as a person or in your career. I also, my dad always tells me you can only control yourself. So remembering that, setting that boundary. I also find that understanding can go a long way. So you're not going to excuse their behavior, but if you try to understand it a little bit more, you might not get as heated.
Let me try to move it around. Susan Yerkes, what's your advice on keeping your wits when you have a boss from hell? We need your sound.
Sharing with other people in the company who know that same thing. I mean, knowing that there are other people within your organization that know exactly what you're going through. And I think when there's a boss from hell, there generally are other people who have experienced that. I think it helps you keep focus. And as Rebecca was saying, it takes a lot of the emotion out of it. And also you can think of your experience, or in my case, my experience, as something where I can be helpful, maybe advocating or giving advice to another person who's dealing with that same individual. And that takes it out of the purely personal realm. If it's a boss from hell, then other people are going to know it. And if it's not, and you share that with other people who are your confidants in the company, then they may very well say, "Hey, look at it this way. You think this is a horrible person, but they've got some issues." So I think the boss from hell isn't always the boss from hell. It might just sound that way to you at that moment. But I believe that there are bosses from hell. And then you enlist your peeps if you can. Besides your not.
Well, hey, I want to
Thanks,
thank
Jim.
everybody. This has been, I always say, we believe in the learning community, that no one has all the answers, but everyone has wisdom, experience, and personal insights that can help us find common ground and solutions. I want to thank, what we're going to do is post a brief summary on LinkedIn and Facebook, and then we are going to post the recording. And John Largent, are you there? We have kicked off our own streaming TV network. Susan, you know about Netflix? That's the largest streaming network. The Lifelong Learning and Sharing Network, owned by Jim Eskin, is the world's smallest streaming network, but still, you got to start somewhere. And this tape will go on that streaming network. And I want to thank everyone for offering your candor. And I mean, a lot of you have expressed courage that not all of us have. And have been willing to take the ultimate sacrifice. So thank you. This has been a very informative and judicial program. And also, neurodivergence felt safe in this space. I hope everyone did. And have a good evening. Let's see if the Red Sox can keep that winning streak alive. Okay. And be well, and we'll see you next month. Thank you very much.
Take care, everybody.
Goodbye.
Thanks, Jeff.